They were simply barracks. Nothing special, nothing unique, just your average set of rooms which were used to house soldiers who were stationed there. But the place they were staying in had a ghost that was known to walk the halls at night, shaking his head sadly as he watched over the living. Our story begins with a young man who is drafted into service. He was given the choice as to what role he would fill, and ended up choosing to become an infantryman. He ended up being sent to a base where he would meet his new unit. There he would meet his new squad leader, who was a no-nonsense type of guy and wasn't afraid to speak his mind. They became quick friends as they got along well together. The two quickly became close friends. One day the squad leader was informed that he and another soldier were going to be performing a training exercise where they would have to simulate taking out enemy targets while also being attacked by other soldiers playing the role of the enemy team. He informed his friend about the training exercise that they would be conducting later that day and told him to meet him by the shooting range. As the time for the exercise came closer, so did the nerves of both soldiers. They headed out to the range where they met up with the rest of their unit and waited for the exercise to begin. As they reached the designated area where they would begin the exercise, they heard the signal that it was about to start. The squad leader and his friend took their positions as they were tasked with guarding the perimeter, while the others conducted search and rescue operations. Their job was to make sure nobody got close enough to the area where the operation was happening without being detected. A few minutes went by and suddenly they heard gunshots followed by screams and shouts. Then everything went silent again. The squad leader and his friend looked at each other and knew that it was their turn to move in. As they slowly crept forward, they made sure to keep their eyes open for any danger. The squad leader noticed some movement ahead and raised his weapon. He pulled the trigger several times as the person he was aiming at fell to the ground. His friend was following closely behind him, and when he saw what lay ahead, his heart skipped a beat. It was the soldier whose life they were trying to save, but he was now lying dead on the ground. The bullet had hit him right between the eyes. Everyone was shocked. Nobody could believe what had just happened. The squad leader felt terrible. He couldn't believe he had shot one of his own comrades. After the incident, the squad leader couldn't bring himself to look at the face of his dead friend. He felt responsible for what had happened and couldn't shake the feeling that he had failed. Later that evening after the funeral, the squad leader returned to his barracks alone. He couldn't bring himself to talk to anyone, so he decided to go back to his room and try to get some sleep. As he walked down the hallway, he noticed that the lights flickered. He didn't think much of it until he got back to his room and the door to his left opened by itself. Inside was a locker where he kept all of his belongings. He cautiously approached the locker and slowly opened it. Everything inside seemed normal, and yet he couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. He closed the door and turned off the lights. He tried to ignore what he had seen and went to bed. But the next morning when he got up, he noticed that his door was wide open. He remembered closing it the night before and couldn't understand how it had opened on its own. Then he noticed something strange. Every time he was on patrol at night, he could feel a sudden cold breeze on his neck. At first, he thought it was just the wind, but then he realized that it only happened when he was on duty. One night while he was on patrol, he found himself walking near the spot where his friend had been shot. Suddenly, he felt a strong gust of cold air. He turned around, but there was nobody there. He continued his rounds, trying to ignore what had happened, but as he walked past the same spot, he felt the same thing again. That's when he stopped and turned around. He looked around, trying to find the source of the cold air, but there was nothing there. It was just the wind. Or was it? A few days passed and the squad leader began to feel like he was being watched. Every time he turned around, he felt like someone was staring at him. He tried to shake off the feeling, but it only got worse. One night, while he was on patrol, he found himself walking near the spot where his friend had died. Suddenly, he felt a strong gust of cold air. He turned around, but there was nobody there. That's when he heard a voice. "I felt him pull me back from a ledge," said the soldier. "At first, I thought I was losing my mind, but then I realized that I wasn't alone." The voice belonged to one of his comrades who'd been on patrol with him that night. The squad leader and his friend were sitting in the barracks, trying to make sense of what had happened. The squad leader had never believed in ghosts before, but now he wasn't so sure. "I felt him pull me back from a ledge," the soldier continued. "I was so scared. I thought I was going crazy, but then I realized that I wasn't alone." The soldier's words echoed in the squad leader's ears. Was there really a ghost haunting the barracks? Later that week, the chaplain visited the spot where the soldier had died. He held a silent prayer for the fallen comrade and asked God to watch over him. The squad leader and his unit stood in silence as they listened to the chaplain's words. When the ceremony was over, the squad leader felt a sense of relief. He knew that his friend was in good hands now. In the weeks that followed, the squad leader and his unit continued to feel the presence of their fallen comrade. They knew that he was watching over them, guiding them, and protecting them. The squad leader decided to make the room where the incident had occurred into a quiet meditation space. He placed a cross on the wall and a picture of his friend on the table. Every day before he went on patrol, he would visit the room and pray for his friend. As the years went by, the squad leader and his unit never forgot their fallen comrade. They knew that he was watching over them, guiding them, and protecting them. The squad leader often thought about the ghost in the barracks and wondered if it was real or just a figment of their imagination. But one thing he knew for sure was that their bond was unbreakable, even in death. One day, the squad leader was listening to a podcast about military folklore when he heard a story that was exactly like his. The story was about a ghost that haunted a barracks, and the details were so accurate that he couldn't help but feel a chill down his spine. He realized that he wasn't the only one who had experienced this, and he felt a sense of comfort knowing that he wasn't alone. From that day on, the squad leader and his unit continued to tell the story of the ghost in the barracks to new recruits. They knew that it was important to remember those who had fallen and to honor their sacrifice. The story of the ghost in the barracks is a reminder that even in the darkest of times, we should never lose hope. It's a story of friendship, courage, and the power of the human spirit. And so the legend of the ghost in the barracks continues to be told, keeping the memory of the fallen soldier alive. The squad leader and his unit knew that he was watching over them, guiding them and protecting them, and they were grateful for his presence every step of the way. I've been telling ghost stories for over 20 years, but this one is still my favorite. This is the story of the ghost in the barracks. It was first published in Reader's Digest in 1986, and it comes from a reader who wishes to remain anonymous. It all started with the death of a teammate. This was during basic training at Fort Sill in Oklahoma. There were around 70 students in our class, and one of them died in an artillery accident. We were very close to him, and we took his death extremely hard. We were given the next day off to go to the lake and try to forget our troubles. But when we returned that night, strange things had already begun to happen. The lights in the barracks flickered and one of the bunks had been emptied. The guy who had been in there was still missing, but his locker was open and his dog tags were lying inside. Now, this wasn't possible because no one could enter the barracks without being challenged by the military police at the front gate. This didn't make any sense, and after it happened again 2 more times, we got pretty scared. Later that week, while conducting a night patrol outside the wire, we were hit by a sudden cold breeze. All 5 of us turned to each other and asked if anyone else had felt that. None of us were wearing jackets, but we weren't cold. And then it happened again. A few days later, I was performing a solo night patrol. My job was to walk along the back wall of the barracks, counting the windows. As I reached the corner, I felt a sudden gust of cold air blow past me. I stopped and listened. Nothing. Then I continued my patrol. At about the 4th window, I felt a strong hand grip my shoulder and spin me around. I screamed and drew my weapon. There in the darkness, standing directly behind me, was the specter of a man dressed in fatigues. He was tall and thin, with long, sandy hair and a beard. His face was pale and sad. For a moment, we just stared at each other. Then, he slowly faded away. As quickly as he had appeared, I stood there frozen, unable to move or speak. Finally, I managed to call for backup, but when they arrived, all they saw was a dark, empty hallway. The next day, I told the first sergeant what had happened. He promised to look into it, but I knew he didn't believe me. No one believed me, so I decided to visit the chaplain. He was an older gentleman with a kind face and gentle eyes. I explained everything to him and asked if he could perform a prayer at the spot where I'd seen the ghost. He agreed. We walked out to the hallway together, and he closed the door behind us. In a low voice, he began to pray. "Dear God, we come before you today to ask for your blessings upon this place. We ask that you watch over those who serve here and protect them from harm. Amen." Afterward, we sat in silence for a few moments. Then the chaplain spoke again. "Do you feel better now?" I nodded, feeling much lighter than before. "Then let us go," he said. And that's all I remember. Okay. When I read this story, I can feel the sincerity of the author. You can tell that he really believes that this is a true story. In a comment, the author replied to some questions. When asked if the barracks were haunted before this incident, he wrote, "No, Not to my knowledge. This is why I mentioned in the story that no one believed me. If anything, this experience made the barracks haunted. When asked what happened to the room, he wrote, "The room was converted into a quiet room for meditation and reflection. At least that's what the sign on the door says. I don't know what goes on in there anymore. That's why I left the ending ambiguous." When asked about the team member who passed away, he wrote, "Sadly, Private First Class Robert J. Miller, whose name is being withheld at the request of his family, died instantly from massive internal injuries sustained when he was struck by an errant artillery round. He was buried with full military honors at Arlington National Cemetery. A few months ago, I was looking through the Reader's Digest website and came across this story, and I thought, hey, this is great. This is exactly the type of story that would be perfect for this channel." But then when I looked at the comments, I noticed something interesting. The story was originally published in 1986, but most of the comments were from 2014. Apparently, a few years earlier, this story went viral. It spread rapidly around the world and reached thousands of readers. It gained so much traction that it even caught the attention of a popular military folklore podcast. They reached out to the author and asked if he would be willing to tell his story on their show. To his credit, the author agreed and he flew out to California to meet with They interviewed him and then re-released his story to a whole new audience. Here is what one of the podcasters said about the story. "Hands down, this is the best ghost story I've ever heard, bar none. It has everything: suspense, mystery, dread, fear, sadness, hope, and even a little bit of comedy. I honestly couldn't ask for a better ghost story. I think the reason this story is so good is that it feels so real. You can tell that the author really believes this is a true story. Also, this isn't just a spooky ghost story. It has a lot of heart. It's a story about loss, friendship, courage, and faith. And that's why it resonates with so many people. If you want to hear more stories like this, stay tuned. And if you want to hear the original story, I'll provide more information below. Thanks for watching.